It could be complete, it could be more than complete. You may have done more than one thing during that session, or maybe you need 6 sessions to get something else done. Regardless, we feel like that session is a good chunk of time for you to get something done. It's concrete enough to share or socialize with the team if you wanted to, right? That's our session. So this is certainly a under 1 session activity to get this whole thing up and running. Everything I'm showing you, hopefully it's less than a session, and since I'm sharing some other inputs with you, hopefully it's even shorter than that for you, right? Okay, so the web application.sln, this is the solution file. I don't know if I looked any much into it, but it's got some project details, it's got some GUID, and some basic stuff to get this project level thing going, essentially, right? Not super interesting, so we can ignore it, and then we'll go to this is the default. If you go look at the examples on the .NET pages, so if you search for like .NET Weather Forecast Controller, you'll actually see this, and this is the same code, right? It's there on their documentation pages as well. So this is literally the example from Microsoft's documentation. So let's talk about this a little bit. Right now before we go here, let's go to program.cs. And if you're a Node developer or an Express developer, I'm going to just call out for where it smells like what, right? This part of the syntax to me smells a lot like Node and Express, right? Or server-side JavaScript. Just looking at it, if I didn't look carefully enough, I might have thought this is actually Node, right? Anyways, it says that if your environment is development, right, it says, do the app use Swagger and Swagger UI, and that's how we are actually seeing this. And actually, let's comment this out. It's strange. I did a Apple / that did not work, the shortcut. That's interesting. Okay, let's just comment these 2 things out and say apply changes, and then let's see if it does a hot deploy. Maybe it doesn't. Let's just stop it. I could have just restarted it, and I'm sure there's a way to set up hot deployment, right? You certainly want to do that. I hate to rerun servers ever. Restart, sorry, when I'm doing development. Who wants to waste the 2 seconds, which is like 2 seconds every 2 minutes, like for 12 hours a day, right? It's a complete waste of time. Okay, you see that it's not running right now, and since we had the default configured to be 7207, and I'm sure something in here says it's development, so it's trying to use that as a default, and it does not work. So let's just go back here, apply the changes, and then restart it. And then we should surely see this work now, and it does. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, so this is just it's just showing you a Swagger version of the defaults that are here. So these are the APIs that I've added, and we'll take a look at this, right? So the weather forecast is what the example is, and it's a very straightforward example. If you go to the code here, there is maybe we can start with the model or with the controller. Actually, let's start the model, right? You see here, right, one of the main differences I could spot as a Java developer, as well as it's actually more succinct than Java, which is what I'd expected to see in C#. It is actually not verbose, right? So you have getters and setters, and you're not writing 3-4 lines of code or even generating the code using editors for creating that, for creating those getters and setters. It's just a get and a set, and boom, you have a getter and a setter, right? That's one thing I noticed, which I think is crispy. The rest of it, you can see that it looks very much Java-like, right? As opposed to doing a package, you have a namespace, and there's some syntactic differences, right? And it's better, actually. I like the syntax here, and it seems a lot more like TypeScript to me. And given that, Microsoft, if I'm not wrong, is the company where TypeScript is actually coming from, so maybe they have a lot of things in common. Maybe it's the same people, the same group of people who actually contributed to some of the initial design or whatnot, right? So that was, and so if you're a Java developer and then you're a Node developer, like someone like I think it would take to C# immediately, right? So I'm actually eager. Maybe I'll pick up a project the next time around. That is, I love to do things I've not done, and this is not something I've done clearly, right? So maybe I'm eager to doing that stuff. Okay, so that's the model. Let's go look at the controller. It's got, again, the syntax screams Java to me, right? So this is an array of strings. It's got a bunch of values. We'll ignore the logger. That's not like super interesting. And here is the basic code, right? All that it's doing is it's going through. It's getting a random number between minus 20 and 55, setting it as a temperature, and it has a date here where we'll see where the date is being displayed. So it's like 3 lines of code in an enumerator, and it's picking up. It's aiming to render these summaries, right? So now that we have run it, let's close this one here and then go to this actual weather forecast, right? That's the endpoint. Now, if you go look at the endpoint, it basically goes by, I want to say, the name of the controller, right? So, and in that sense, it's probably very close to Nest, actually, more so than Express. Again, I work across these languages on a daily basis. Sometimes I might give you the wrong examples, but hopefully you get the idea. But that to me sounds a bit like Nest. So that's weather forecast, and to me that's actually the URL, right? That's the controller. Now you see that it returns 5 items in this array, and every time I refresh, you see a different list of values, right? So what that means is, if you look at the code here, it goes 1 to 5, and I bet you make it 1 to 6. Go continue, apply changes. Let's see if this gets picked up by the hard deployment. Oh, it does. Okay. So I guess the previous change did not get picked up, maybe because of where it was. It was in this file, maybe. But again, these changes are getting picked up, right? So it's getting you a range and then giving you a range between minus 20 and 55. If I make it to minus 20 and 20 and I apply the changes and I refresh it, and it's, it's a centigrade, right? So you see it's all between minus 20 and 20, right? It is not. Yeah, minus 20, obviously minus 15 is higher than minus 20. Yep. So that's the change, right? So, and it's rendering these 4 fields: date, temperature F, temperature C, and then summary, right? Date, temperature C, summary. Where is the temperature F coming from? Yeah, probably it's coming from the model here. I haven't looked into that part, but this JSON that's being returned, possibly it's because, let's try to comment this out and see what happens, right? Because the Apple / does not work. What is the shortcut for adding a comment here? Comment, Apple, let's see. Oh, it's Apple option /. Yep. Okay, now let's apply the changes. Deleting property requires restarting the application. Let's restart the application. And let's see what happens here. Let's close this guy, go back here. Okay, we don't see that, right? Okay, that's interesting. So essentially all that we did here, right? Oh, and then if you put it back, you don't have to restart. So I have to see this a little bit better. So this is even more succinct, right? You're actually returning a JSON back, doing a 2 array, but and maybe you're modifying some values here and you're not modifying the other value, but it's still, the response is driven by everything here. So there's no DTO in between, as I can tell in this case. So everything here in the model is reflected back in the response, but in a real world you'll have a DTO layer or a value object, one of those things, to actually control what this should be, because you may want to expose temperature F as not temperature F as something else, for instance, right? So that's what happens there. What else is of interest? I think that's essentially it. And there's an API controller, which is probably the same one that I had. I also created a second controller just to see how the path variations might work. So all that I did was add a new controller that extends from controller base. So extends as this colon here. And then I had a bunch of methods, which again is very Nest-like to me. Right, you drop these annotations, you put the path at the top here. I said API 1, API 2 status, and that's it. I think in API 1 I just had a key value pair, right? So let's go to API 1 here. Yep, so I'm returning a JSON, right? And I'm not using a model, I'm just using a key value